Imagine walking down a narrow street in a small town in northeast Brazil, just as the sun is slipping behind the horizon. Windows begin to close, the yellow streetlights buzz to life, and suddenly you realize there are no children outside anymore. Not a single one. The silence comes out of nowhere, almost like someone gave an invisible signal, a warning everyone understands, but no one dares to say out loud. You keep walking. You turn a corner, and an old man with slow, dragging steps crosses your path. A thin man, much taller than anyone his age should be. Skin with a sickly yellow tint, empty eyes, and a voice that slips out more like a whisper than speech. He carries a cloth bag, and he watches everything around him, especially those who are alone, especially those who are unprotected. They say that if you see this man after dark, you must never look him in the eyes. They say he's sick, and the cure for his sickness is something terrible, something no one should ever even imagine. He's searching for livers, human livers. And when he finds a child who's distracted, hungry, or curious, he takes them with him, and they're never seen again. But who is this figure, really? A sick old man? A monster invented to scare the young? Or something even worse, something that has walked through generations, hiding in the shadows of Brazilian folklore? Today, on Urban Secrets, we're rediving into the dark legend of the Papa Figo, the figure responsible for making countless children lock their doors before going to sleep. The story of the Papa Figo might sound like just another tale made to frighten kids, but its roots run much deeper, revealing an older Brazil, shaped by fears, folk beliefs, and the unique ways communities taught caution. The legend grew mainly in the Northeast, where everyday life in small towns blended naturally with stories passed down from generation to generation. Back in a time without internet, phones, or widespread streetlights, imagination had more room to grow, and rumors spread fast, taking the shape of warnings. At the heart of this oral tradition, the Papa Figo became a symbol of the unknown. The mysterious, sickly old man was described in many ways, sometimes extremely thin, sometimes clumsy and hunched, always fragile-looking yet dangerous. In some versions, he suffers from a horrible disease, and only human livers can keep him alive. In others, he's almost supernatural, able to hide in the shadows and appear without a sound. It's important to remember that historically, many Brazilian communities lived with real fears: missing children, isolation, and growing urban violence. So the Papa Figo became more than a folk tale. It became a form of protection. Parents and grandparents used the story to keep children from wandering alone, talking to strangers, or exploring dangerous places. In the absence of official safety campaigns, the legend was the warning, and everyone understood its message. But maybe the most fascinating part of this figure isn't just its origin. It's how the legend survived, how it transformed and adapted over time. Even today, with all our technology and instant information, there are still whispers, fears, and strange accounts involving the Papa Figo. So what keeps this legend alive? What makes so many people still believe, or at least avoid talking about it after dark? The legend of Papa Figo always starts with a simple warning. Don't go out after sunset. But, like every good horror story, it only becomes real when someone decides to ignore that rule. And that's exactly what happened in many of the stories still told across towns in the northeast of Brazil. In one of the oldest versions, shared by residents of Pernambuco, Papa Figo was always seen in the darkest alleys, walking slowly, leaning on a crooked cane. He had this habit of lightly knocking on doors, calling out to whoever was inside with a raspy, almost unintelligible voice. Sometimes he asked for water. Sometimes he asked for food, but he always watched the person who answered, especially if there were children around. People say he suffered from a strange illness, something that made his skin yellowish and his veins bulge under the surface. To survive, he needed to consume human livers, by a macabre remedy, but, according to him, essential. And for that reason, he chose his victims patiently. He didn't run. He didn't threaten. He just followed quietly, waiting for fear itself to clear the path. There's a story about a boy who first saw him at the town street market. The old man approached slowly, offering candy in exchange for help carrying a bag. The kid noticed the bag seemed way too heavy for someone that frail, and that whatever was inside it gave off a strange, metallic smell. He refused, ran home, and swore the old man stood there watching him, motionless, until he disappeared behind a fruit stall. The next morning, other kids in the area said they'd been approached by the same man. In another, darker version, Papa Figo isn't just a sick old man, he's a creature capable of changing shape. Something that hides in the shadows of trees and takes on the form of ordinary people to get close to its victims. Some claim they heard footsteps behind them, even when no one was there. Others say they saw a thin, distorted figure crawling along the walls of houses, as if searching for cracks or open windows. What all these stories have in common is that growing feeling of being watched, as if someone was always observing, waiting for a moment of carelessness. In many rural towns, it was common for mothers to call their children inside as soon as the sky started to darken, closing windows and locking doors in a hurry. The name Papa Figo was whispered, never spoken aloud, as if saying it could draw him near. And while some people believe it's all just folklore, others swear the old man still wanders around, hiding in dimly lit streets, sitting alone on empty park benches, showing up exactly when no one expects him. Some say he appears wherever there's vulnerability. Children alone, distracted people, careless families, like a silent predator guided by instinct and by hunger. The legend survives because it taps into a universal fear, the fear of the unknown slowly approaching without making a sound. The idea that something or someone might be lurking, watching, getting closer at the exact moment you think you're safe. And when it comes to Papa Figo, the feeling is always the same, no matter where you are. he might be a little closer than you think. Even after all these decades, Papa Figo still shows up in stories that, at the very least, leave people uneasy. One of the most well-known cases comes from a small town in the countryside of Alagoas, where residents claimed that a very thin man began appearing at the same time every night right before the lights in the town square flickered off. He walked slowly and seemed to pay special attention to the children who played near the bandstand. Parents started picking them up earlier, but the discomfort remained. No one knew who the man was or where he came from. They say he never spoke. He just stared. In Pernambuco, another episode became so talked about that it eventually turned into part of the local folklore. An 8-year-old girl said she was followed by an unknown old man while walking home from her grandmother's house. She claimed he walked just a few steps behind her, always keeping the exact same distance even when she picked up her pace. When she got home, she locked the door and ran to the window. The man was still there, motionless, staring at the door as if waiting for her to come back out. By the time her parents called the police, the old man had vanished. After that, debates began to grow. Some believed it was nothing more than collective panic. Others swore the details matched sightings from decades earlier. After all, how could so many different people describe the same figure? The yellowish skin, the hunched posture, the stare that lasted a little too long to be normal, the constant silence, the feeling that something dangerous was always just about to happen. The most disturbing part is that many of these accounts aren't old at all. Several were reported in recent years, always involving children, always involving someone mysterious, wandering through empty places, always invoking the same name that has survived for generations. And then comes the question no one can fully ignore. Was Papa Figo just a warning invented to protect children? Or is there truly something out there, something that walks at night, watching houses and empty streets, waiting for a moment of carelessness? The truth is, when so many stories repeat themselves, it becomes hard not to look over your shoulder when you alone on a quiet street after sunset. When we look at the legend of Papa Figo, we realize it's more than just a scary story for kids. It's a portrait of how popular culture creates figures capable of crossing generations and adapting to each era's fears. In an older Brazil without technology, full of uncertainties and shadows, Papa Figo was the silent warning that kept families close once the sun went down. Today, even with all our modernity, there are still people who feel a chill while walking through empty streets, remembering that someone at some point swore they saw a strange man watching from afar. Maybe the power of this legend lies exactly in the doubt it leaves behind. Did Papa Figo really exist? Does he still exist? Or is he simply the shape we give to something bigger, something that follows every human society? The fear of the unknown, the fear of being vulnerable, the feeling that there might always be someone hidden in the dark, listening to our footsteps. The truth is, legends like this survive because they tap into something primal, They remind us that no matter how rational we try to be, there will always be stories that defy logic. There will always be accounts that make us hesitate before opening the door, before walking down that silent street, before trusting the stranger who approaches a little too slowly. And in the end, Papa Figo stays alive not because someone proved he's real, but because no one can prove he's not. This shadowy figure still lingers in conversations, memories, fears, and especially in the imagination of anyone who grew up hearing that he could appear at any moment. If you made it this far, tell me in the comments, have you ever heard a version of the Papa Figo story? Have you ever had a strange experience after dark? Or is all of this just folklore to you? I want to know what you believe. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode of Urban Secrets, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel grow and shows that you want more stories like this. And make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next mysteries we re-diving into. Because in the end, the truth might be much closer than we think, and you won't want to miss the next secret.